sang this song to me. There was a message in its melody, sweetest lyrics that I ever heard. There's a message in the songs of birds. He said, tomorrow is another day, living is the only way tomorrow's gonna ever come. Listen to the words of the song. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be
Good afternoon. I want to thank everyone who's watching this show tonight. And of course, as you know, I am thanking the heavens because we had a wonderful, seamless connection. Okay. And we know that the rest of the night's going to do that. So, yay. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, known as the Empowerment Doctor, and I want to welcome you to a sip of inspiration. And tonight's topic is Real Men Connect. Joining me is Dr. Joe Martin. We've got to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started, as I have been reminded I'm not very good at this. I need you to go in and like my Facebook page, Empower DR. If you go to Empowerment Doctor, that's me too, but that's not where this airs. So you need to go and like Empower DR. Also, I want to thank you guys who've gone out and visited my merchandise store and for the stuff that you've bought. And I know it's pretty cool. So thank you very much for that. We do have a sponsor, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. So I'm going to get my little cheat sheet so I don't get it wrong. When you need a supply company to rise to your needs, call Resource Industrial Supply and Equipment. I'd like to thank the Rise Company for supporting us and being a sponsor of this program. So let's get started. So Dr. Joe Martin has joined me tonight, who is a spiritually focused builder of men. I thought it was very interesting because we have a lot of conversation where we're generally talking about issues and people who are working with women or children, but not a whole lot about men. So when I stumbled over his bio, of course, I bothered his email to death till he said yes. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. I'm going to read you his suggested introduction, which I thought was pretty cool. Dr. Joe Martin is an award-winning speaker, author, and certified man builder who helps Christian men win at what matters and frustrates them the most as husbands, fathers, and leaders. He's authored 9 books, including Are You the Man? 201 Lessons I Wish My Dad Would Have Taught Me, and The Real Man Spiritual Leader Blueprint. I think those are actually fantastic copies. So you guys should run out to wherever you buy your books and be sure that you get copies of those. And not just guys, literally, but everybody watching. Because I think healing, no matter where your focus is, works for everyone. He's spoken for more than 750 organizations, churches, and universities in 4 countries. And he's a columnist for All Pro Dad, Lifeway Men, and Promise Keepers. He's also the host of Real Men Connect, the #1 top-rated radio podcast on Apple Podcasts for Christian men. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm with the Empowerment Doctor. Who knew? I made it. I made it. Thank you, Dr. Stephanie. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me today. I am so excited about being here.
Thank you for saying yes. So with that, let's get started because you've got some great topics. And as usual, as I tell the audience, sometimes the pre-show before we actually go live on Facebook and Zoom is incredibly interesting. So too bad you guys can't join us there. So you'll just have to hope that
we had a great conversation before we came on.
We had a great conversation. So why don't we start by you telling us how you started? Where did you start before you were called to do this work?
Well, my prior life, Stephanie, was in education. We were talking about that before. I taught every level. I started elementary school, taught first graders. I taught alternative ed high school, and I taught at the college level. The only level I did not teach was middle school. And people always ask me, why didn't you teach middle school? I said, because I'm not crazy. And so middle school is tough, man. But no, seriously, my background is in education is because of the way I grew up. And I was what they considered an underdog, a person who was overlooked. And I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school. And so they missed me, and I was told not to go to college because I wasn't college material. But yet, I became the youngest professor ever hired to teach in the state of Florida as a tenure professor at the age of 24. And so I'm thinking, how do you miss a guy like that? How you miss a kid like that growing up? And so when I got an education, my job was to make sure we don't miss any of those children like that. Because I grew up in one of the toughest inner city ghettos in Miami, Florida, in a place called Liberty City. Liberty
Oh,
City.
I know Liberty City. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually
And so for
I'm
those who
yeah.
are over the age of 40, when I mentioned Liberty City, they say, Liberty City, that sounds familiar. I said, Two Live Crew. Oh yeah, I've heard of Liberty City. Now, if they're under 40, I mentioned Grand Theft Auto. Oh yeah, I've heard of Liberty City, because when they make a video game about your neighborhood, that's not a good thing. And so, so that's what I did prior to working in men's ministry. And I'm giving you, if there was a bird's eye view, we would be right now in space, because there's so much underneath that. But yeah, so prior to this, I was in education, and now God has called me to work with training, mentoring, teaching, and discipling men for his glory.
So people always like to say, God called me to do this. So tell me a little bit about that struggle. So did you go willingly, or did you go like I went, kicking and screaming?
My story is the Black version of Jonah. As far as when God called me into men's ministry, I'm like, no way. I said, I don't even like men. Right. And I said, I'm a man. I don't even like men. And I'm like, no way, God, you have made a mistake. My career, I love teaching. I would do it for free. I'm being paid more than I ever expected, anticipated in my lifetime. I'm only working like half a year, and yet I can do anything I want, go any place I want, dictate my schedule. Why in the world would you want me to leave that to go work with men? So it was a calling, but it was one I was ignoring the call, and I did not want to do it. And when the way God works is that I was doing it and thinking, I'll do this for the rest of my life. I was 20 something years into this, and I'm thinking, oh, I'll do this for the rest of my life. God, I know you tell me to work with men, but I don't want to work with men. He gave me a distaste for working in education. And that just blew me away. It's not, and if anybody who knew me in education, you couldn't have imagined they wouldn't have imagined me telling them, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like it anymore. That is unheard of for me. That's how much I loved education. And what God gave me a distaste for was not the work itself, but realizing they weren't addressing the real issue. And even though they were paying me all this money to help turn school districts around and schools around, work with at-risk kids and all this other stuff, when I told them what the problem was, which was the man in the home, whether he's in the home or not in the home, 9 times out of 10, if you ask enough questions, you're going to find out there's a wound from the father. And as one of my good friends who's also in the podcast world with me, he says, when a man gets it, everybody wins. Because if you can help heal the man, you heal the home, you heal the marriage, you heal the kids, you heal the neighborhood, you heal the community, and you change an environment. And which makes our job a lot easier as educators to be able to reach the kids. I know, Stephanie, you're a counselor and you work with men and women. And I know when you get in there, there's usually a man problem somewhere that you realize, wow, you got some daddy issues. You know what I mean? There's some father wounds there. And we're not saying women are blameless. They play a part in this too. But 9 times out of 10, I can almost guarantee you, all you got to do to find out the core of a problem is ask this question: who's your daddy? Who's your dad? Tell me about your dad. And I don't care what you see in society. You can ask, I hate to go there on politically. They say everybody has their opinion about Trump. Who's your daddy? You see the George Floyd incident with Chauvin. Who's your daddy? I always want to know who the dad is. Some person shoots up all these schools. Who's your daddy? Because somewhere along the line, if you dig enough, you're going to find there's a man problem. So when I finally accepted it, I said, God, I'm not enjoying this anymore. He said, because you're not really addressing the real issue. Now, are you ready, Jonah, to stop running away from me and go back to Tarshish? Go back and now go to Nineveh and go deal with my people. And so I accepted that invitation and decided to do it, kicking and screaming. But when I did, it ended up changing my life. And I told you before we came on the air that now I've been doing this full-time 6 years, and there's not a week that's gone by that I haven't cried. In 6 years. And I'm working with men, not 1 week. So women, I feel your pain. I feel your pain. They got me crying, every week. You know, I'm not married to any of them. So that's where I'm at right now in my career with this.
It got you one, oh my God, every week it's like, are you still married? You use a quote that says, you will never change your life unless you change something you do daily. The secret to your success is found in your daily routine. So I found that as I was digging around in your background online. So so how do you use that in your counseling? And then what are some of the things that you would recommend people, how do they start to change? Because people don't want to make small changes. They want to make huge changes. And is it a difference?
Yeah, and full disclosure, because if my wife ever heard this, she'll say, he stole that from me. I actually stole that quote from my wife. But she says it this way. She runs a fitness business where she does fitness training, boot camp. My wife is ex-military, ex-law enforcement. I'm married to the black version of G.I. Jane is basically who I'm married to. And she has this sign in her gym that says, nothing in your life is going to change until you change something. And so obviously she's dealing with women coming in who want to change their bodies, get healthy. And she says, you can't keep doing the same things, expecting things to change. That's the definition of insanity. So she has this sign that says, if you want to change, you can't change anything unless you change something. And so going back now to answer your question, back to the daily routine, you are your habits. You're as healthy as you're as sick as your secrets, but you're as healthy as your habits. That's a saying. That's not my wife. That's mine, Stephanie. I take full credit for that one. And so, but you're as healthy as your habits. The question is, what are your habits? Now, I told you before we came on the air that I like keeping things real simple and plain. I'm going to share something I shared with my students when I was in education. And I would give them a quote of the day every day in class, hoping that something's going to change their life and it's going to make an impact. And then we get to the end of the semester or the end of the school year, they couldn't wait to hear, what quote has he been holding back from us the whole time that he would not tell us on the first day, halfway through the semester, midterms? He's been waiting. We know he's been saving one for the last day because I'm never going to see them again. And this is my quote. And this is now about affecting change. I told my students on the last day, I said, if you want to be successful at anything, I don't care whether it be being a parent, a CEO, it doesn't matter. If you want to be successful at anything, it is very easy. Watch what most people would do and then do the total opposite. That's it. Watch what most people would do and then don't do that. 9 times out of 10, if you go in the opposite direction of most people, you're going to be successful. And Steph, you know how our kids can be someday. They'll raise their hand. Well, Dr. Martin, what about that 10th time? You said 9 times out of 10. What about that 10th time? I said, well, you're going to prison, but that's worth the risk. You got a 90% chance of getting extraordinary success. And that one time you're going to end up in the penitentiary, but you'll get out eventually. But so 9 times out of 10, you're going to be more successful if you go in the opposite direction. So let's go back to your daily habits then. If you want to see change happen immediately, first of all, take a journal of what you do in a given day. What do you have when you get up in the morning? What's the first thing that you do? Do you need an alarm clock to get up in the morning, or does your purpose get you up in the morning? Does your passion get you up in the morning? Do you have your day planned and pre-planned, or are you letting the day happen to you? Do you have time set aside just for your quiet time with God and getting into his presence before you tackle your day? Or can you just kind of call out and cry out to God while you're going through a crisis, as opposed to leaning on Christ before you have a crisis? And so if you look at what are you eating during the day? How do you eat? Have you gotten, all you gotta do is chart your day, and then going back to my kids, now go back and look at it and do the total opposite of that the next day. So this time I'm going to go to bed earlier instead of going to bed late. I'm going to get up earlier than getting up late. I'm not going to hit my snooze button this time where I'm hitting it so much that it has ooze on it. It doesn't even say snooze anymore. I'm not going to do that this morning. You know what? I'm not going to just fit God into my schedule. I'm going to make him the center and the first thing on my schedule, on my calendar. And so if we just do the opposite of what we normally do, we'll change. Now, if you're getting great results based on what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing. Don't break it if it's not broken. But if you don't like the results that you're getting in your life, then try the opposite approach. And this is even biblical, because it tells us not to conform to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. But if you're not going to conform to the patterns of the world, you can't follow what the world does. You can't do what everybody else does. You've been set apart by God to be different. So if you want to make a difference in your life, you have to be different. But start with doing the opposite. Now, I know that may be too simple and plain, but try it and see what happens.
It does work. I often tell people to, just change one little
Yeah,
thing.
just one thing.
One thing. So
Yeah.
if it's working out that you need to do, start by like putting on the workout clothes, change that. You'll be surprised. You do that enough days, you'll finally get out and walk or do that other, but just change one thing.
Stephanie, you mentioned about the workout. That's a great example. My son, I have a son who's getting ready to graduate from college. And I made this statement. I'm sure the listeners can relate to this. My wife runs a fitness business, right? I told you that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's what most people, and I've been working out since I was 16 and now I'm 52. So you do the math, that's 36 years of consistent working out. My son was shocked when I told him this. I can't stand working out. I hate it. My wife runs a business on this, right? And I don't like